The lights of the crystal chandelier played in reflections, shimmering off the polished glasses. Lydia's mansion was awash in the luxury of New Year's Eve. Soft music, the subdued laughter of guests, and the aroma of expensive champagne created an atmosphere of serene celebration. Alexis, the new servant with neatly gathered hair, quietly maintained order, discreetly clearing used napkins and empty glasses, while offering fresh snacks. Lydia, the hostess, was the embodiment of perfection. Her white silk dress from a renowned European designer perfectly accentuated her figure, and a diamond necklace complemented the image of a wealthy and successful woman. At some point, as Lydia laughed at another witty joke, Alexis, trying to be as careful as possible, carried a tray with glasses of red wine. But at that moment, someone unexpectedly bumped into her from behind. In an instant, the expensive red wine splattered across Lydia's impeccable dress. She turned, her eyes blazing. The white napkin that Alexis attempted to hand her trembled in her hands. "What have you done?" Lydia growled, examining her ruined dress. Instead of apologies or fear, an unexpected firmness appeared in Alexis's eyes. "Madam," she said quietly but clearly, "I think we should perhaps discuss more serious stains in your life than the one on this dress." The room froze. David, Lydia's husband, who had been conversing with guests, slowly turned toward his wife and the servant. "What do you mean?" Lydia asked coldly. "I am referring to the documents my father once saw in your company's accounting," Alexis replied, looking Lydia straight in the eyes. The silence grew thicker, as if even the music had stopped, leaving only the gentle crackling of candles and the faint breathing of the guests. Lydia tried to maintain her composure, but her hands trembled, betraying her. David stepped forward, his gaze shifting between his wife and Alexis. "Alexis, what exactly do you mean by this?" he asked, attempting to sound calm. "That your wife is not as flawless as she seems," Alexis replied. The celebration, which a moment ago seemed like a carefree festivity, turned into a battlefield. Every word became a relentless blow. Lydia turned pale, her perfect world cracking at the seams, with the first fracture caused by the awkward hand of a young maid who had accidentally spilled red wine on her immaculate dress. Lydia's voice trembled with barely contained rage. David, who had been observing the unfolding scene, frowned. The guests froze, and someone softly gasped, creating an atmosphere of tension and expectation. "What are you saying?" Lydia tried to maintain composure, but uncertainty crept into her voice. Alexis slowly retrieved a folder filled with documents from her pocket. "My father worked as an accountant at your company for many years, and he knew of the financial schemes you use. The documents I found after his death reveal a lot." David stepped forward. His gaze shifted between his wife and Alexis. "Your wife has been systematically diverting company funds to her personal accounts," Alexis said firmly, "using her position and trust to embezzle." Lydia turned pale, her impeccable makeup appearing like a mask ready to crack at any moment. The guests began to exchange glances, realizing that the game was over. Her perfect world was falling apart, and no trickery could help anymore. Alexis stood straight, her simple servant's attire contrasting with her presence, appearing as a true queen of justice. "I need time," David finally said. "Alexis, I want to speak with you tomorrow." Alexis nodded, aware that truth would ultimately prevail. The morning after the New Year's celebration was heavy with silence. Lydia sat by the window in her bedroom, angrily smoothing out the folds on her dress, which still held the scent of spilled wine and the bitterness of defeat. Lydia couldn't believe that a mere maid had dared to challenge her right in the middle of the celebration. "The audacity," she whispered to herself. "Such audacity." David, Lydia's husband, was preparing to go to the office but felt weighed down. The incident with Alexis lingered in his mind. The words about financial misconduct sounded too convincing, too precise. He had known his wife for many years and understood that behind her flawless facade, anything could be hidden. "I want you to bring the documents." "Tomorrow," he had told Alexis at the party, "then you will prove your words." This was a demand, and Alexis nodded with a determination that made David tense. This woman was nothing like an ordinary servant. The fire of confidence burned in her eyes. The next day, David remained in a state of inner tension. The documents of Alexis's late father, who had been an accountant, could overturn everything he thought he knew about his business and marriage. Lydia, noticing his state, attempted to regain her husband's favor with a smile that once worked unfailingly. "Dear, you look troubled. Can the words of any servant really bother you so much?" Her voice was velvety, but David detected false notes. Lydia attempted to touch his hand, but David pulled back. Her flawless image was cracking before his eyes, like a fragile porcelain figurine. By the evening, the tension had reached its peak. David was waiting for Alexis and the documents, which could change his life completely. Lydia moved about the mansion, trying to come up with a plan of action. "If these documents are true," David thought, "my life will never be the same." He had no idea how right he was at that moment. A storm was approaching, capable of destroying everything he held as unshakable: reputation, marriage, and business. The doorbell announced Alexis's arrival. She held a folder, which could be Lydia's sentence. Her hands trembled slightly. With a firm and confident face, David sat at his massive desk, his gaze focused and cautious. Over the New Year's Eve, he had spent a sleepless night analyzing every word Alexis said, every detail of her unexpected revelation. "I brought the documents I spoke of yesterday," Alexis said. "Here is all the financial data my father collected over the years." David slowly opened the folder. Accounting documents, emails, bank account statements. Each page was evidence against his wife, Lydia. The numbers painted a grim picture of embezzlement. "How long have you known about this?" David quietly asked, not taking his eyes off the documents. "My father suspected something was wrong a few years ago," replied Alexis, "but he was afraid to act. Before he passed away, he told me everything." Each page of the documents revealed new details about the scheme Lydia had methodically built over the years. Unauthorized transfers, fictitious contracts, kickbacks, it was all carefully documented. Lydia, sensing the impending threat, tried to discredit the documents. "It's a forgery," Lydia shouted. "Alexis is just trying to tarnish me." Her voice trembled with despair. David felt the ground slipping beneath his feet. Years of lies and betrayal descended upon him with a heavy weight. Yet, along with the pain, came freedom. Freedom from illusions, from a false marriage. Alexis listened in silence, understanding that her father, even after death, had restored justice. The accidental incident with wine at the New Year's celebration had become a point of no return, the beginning of the end of an entire criminal story. David looked at Alexis and saw her truly for the first time, not as a servant, but as an ally, a person who helped him see the truth. The morning light barely penetrated through the heavy curtains of the mansion, creating a ghostly atmosphere of impending changes. Lydia paced the office, gathering documents, feverishly forming a plan of defense. "That girl won't destroy me," she whispered, rifling through old financial reports. Lydia understood that her only chance to save her reputation was to find a way to discredit Alexis and her father. She dialed numbers of old acquaintances, trying to gather information that could be her weapon. David, on the contrary, acted methodically and cold-bloodedly. He invited James, a well-known auditor he completely trusted. James was a top-notch professional, renowned for his integrity and meticulousness. "I need a complete review of all the documents," said David, handing James the folder Alexis had brought. "Every digit, every record must be checked." James nodded. His tired eyes sparked with professional interest. He understood that he was dealing with a case that could become significant for the entire business community. By the evening, James completed the preliminary analysis. His conclusion was categorical and ruthless. The documents provided by Alexis confirmed Lydia's systematic financial manipulations. Tens of millions had been siphoned off to shell companies, and the tax schemes were so intricate that even for criminal economists it seemed more complex than anticipated. "It's even worse than we thought," David said in horror, reviewing the reports. Lydia, upon learning the results of the audit, felt her world beginning to crumble. Her grace and control melted away with every passing minute. She understood this was just the beginning of her downfall. James provided an official conclusion, which could be crucial evidence in future litigation. Every page was numbered as professional condemnation of her decade-long schemes. David made a decision: divorce and complete division of assets. Lydia would lose everything: the mansion, the business, the reputation. The only thing left for her would be memories of a once brilliant life. Alexis watched the proceedings with rare composure. She knew this was retribution, but not revenge. "I will start anew," David said, gazing out the office window. The frosty evening descended upon the city, enveloping the luxurious mansion in an atmosphere of inevitable change. Lydia stood by the large panoramic window. Her reflection seemed ghostly and fragile, entirely unlike the image of the unyielding mistress of life she had created over the years. Phone calls, one by one, became a quiet but deadly sentence. Friends who had showered her with compliments yesterday now conspicuously disconnected their calls. Social connections built on lies and showmanship evaporated in an instant, as if they had never existed. "They are all traitors," Lydia whispered, her fingertips touching the cold glass. But deep down, she knew. It was she who had betrayed herself. Every financial manipulation, every lie told to her husband and partners was now coming back to her like a boomerang. A sudden knock on the door made her flinch. Standing on the threshold was Alexis, the same maid who had overturned her world a few days ago. Only now, the young woman's eyes held not playful defiance, but the calm of a victor. "I've come to deliver an official notice from the attorneys," Alexis said coldly, extending a white envelope. Lydia took the document, her hands betraying her by trembling. She understood. This was an official demand to vacate the mansion, which was a symbol of her power and success. "You have no idea how much damage you have done to my reputation," Lydia hissed, struggling to maintain her pride. Alexis smiled, not maliciously, but with some philosophical calmness. "Reputation is built by actions, not words. My father always said that." Behind Alexis, David appeared, silently watching the scene. His gaze was harsh, yet it no longer held the blind fury it once did. Now it was the gaze of a man who had made a difficult but necessary decision. "You have a week to gather your belongings," he said, addressing Lydia. "After that, the mansion will be sold, and the proceeds partially directed toward compensating the damage done to the company." Lydia sank into a chair, feeling her world finally disintegrate. Her elegant high-heeled shoes, once symbols of power, now seemed ridiculous relics of a past life. Alexis and David exchanged glances. Between them arose a silent understanding, two people of entirely different origins and status, united by a desire to restore justice. As they exited, Lydia remained alone. The grand mansion, once the center of her universe, now felt like a vast, empty prison she had built herself. The only thing she could do now was accept defeat and start anew, but that required courage, which she clearly lacked. The morning light slowly filled the spacious living room of the mansion which had once belonged to Lydia. Now the room seemed entirely different. Cold, stripped of the ostentatious luxury that had been so carefully maintained for years. Lydia stood in the middle of the room, surrounded by cardboard boxes. Her hands mechanically packed items, but her gaze was empty and lost. Each item, a valuable statuette, a rare painting, elite porcelain, now seemed only a reminder of the past life she had ruthlessly destroyed with her own hands. In the office where Alexis and David discussed the company's recovery plan, their voices sounded quiet but confident. "We need to completely revise our financial strategy," said David, spreading documents on the table. "Transparency should become our guiding principle." Alexis nodded, her gaze focused and professional. From a simple servant, she had transformed into a key employee. David observed Alexis keenly. In his eyes there was deep respect. He understood that this young woman had not only uncovered the corrupt system, but was now helping rebuild it on new, honest principles. "I'm inviting you to join the management team," he said unexpectedly. "Your knowledge and integrity are indispensable to us." Alexis was surprised, but quickly composed herself. She understood. This wasn't just a job offer. It was a chance to change the system from within. "I accept," she replied firmly. At that moment, James, the independent auditor, entered the room. He held a folder of documents and looked satisfied. "The initial audit shows that we can recover about 60% of the illegally transferred funds," he reported. "The company's reputation will suffer minimally." Upon hearing their discussion, Lydia flinched. A box of crystal slipped from her hands and shattered into pieces, symbolic, just like her former life. David did not scold her. He merely nodded to one of the workers who quickly cleaned up the shards. "The lawyers have prepared divorce papers," he calmly informed Lydia. There was no anger or vengeance in David's voice, only a calm understanding of necessity. The feeling of breaking away from the old world of lies and corruption, giving way to a new reality, honest, transparent, and just. The mansion, once a symbol of boundless luxury and secret conspiracies, was now becoming a place of rebirth. Here, a new business was emerging, new relationships, a new philosophy. "Now only through honest means," David stated with confidence as the clock struck midnight, enveloping the luxurious mansion in an atmosphere of inevitable change. The morning light gently filled the spacious office. David leaned back in his chair, his gaze focused and calm. Over the past months, he had thought much about his past life, about the illusions he had created with Lydia. Alexis, seated opposite, methodically sorted financial reports, her fingers gliding over the pages with precision and assured ease. "You know," David unexpectedly smiled, "I never thought a maid would become my most reliable ally." Alexis smiled back, not taking her eyes off the documents. "Sometimes the truth comes from where you least expect it." Their joint work had become both a test and a healing process. The company, once mired in corruption, was gradually acquiring a new image. James, who had helped uncover Lydia's criminal scheme, was now working with them permanently. His professionalism and integrity provided an additional guarantee of transparency in business processes. "We've almost completed the restoration of financial statements for the last 3 years, James said, entering the office. "I can confirm that the company is on a positive trajectory." David nodded. His divorce from Lydia was finalized quickly. She did not contest the clear evidence of her guilt. The mansion was sold, and proceeds directed towards compensating for the damage caused by her schemes. Alexis, who started as a simple servant, had become a key employee of the financial department. Her understanding of numbers, inherited from her father, and natural intuition helped find unconventional solutions to complex problems. For Dad, Alexis quietly stated, smoothing the official papers. David placed a hand on her shoulder as a gesture of support and understanding. The newly established charitable foundation, in the name of her father, promised to be the bright beginning of a new era for all those aspiring to honesty and professional growth. With each day, this new world was becoming increasingly real and transparent. Did you enjoy this story? Tell us your thoughts in the comments. Give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel to not miss new releases. See you soon.